minus 50 degrees Celsius, miles of ice, giant, furry elephant-like creatures with tusks 3 meters long, humans in caves, in the dark around fires. This isn't just a dream. This is what the world was like tens of thousands of years ago. Today we will explore the secrets of the Ice Age. We will examine the most challenging period in human history. We will see how the glaciers advanced, how animals survived, and how humans persevered. It's okay if you fall asleep. After all, this is a sleep documentary. But have you ever wondered, how did the world get to where it is today? The answer, it's hidden in the Ice Age. When we think of the Ice Age, we immediately think of cold, snow, and glaciers. But to understand the Ice Age, we first need to know this. Many ice ages have occurred throughout Earth's history. The last great ice age began approximately 2.5 million years ago and ended 11,000 years ago. Scientists call this period the Pleistocene epoch. However, during this long period, the climate constantly changed. Sometimes the glaciers advanced, covering everything. Sometimes they retreated. There were also milder periods. This cycle is called ice ages and interglacial periods. So why did ice ages occur? The answer actually lies in the relationship between the planet Earth and the Sun. The Earth's orbit is not a perfect circle, it's slightly oval. The Earth's axis is also not fixed. It slowly changes over thousands of years. These changes affect the amount of heat we receive from the Sun. Sometimes less sunlight reaches the poles. In this case, the snow doesn't melt. It accumulates and becomes glaciers. As glaciers grow, they reflect more sunlight into space. Because white surfaces absorb light, icy surfaces reflect it. This further cools the Earth. A domino effect begins. The climate gradually cools. Glaciers grow even larger. However, the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere also played an important role. During ice ages, the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere decreased. This creates a greenhouse effect. It heats the Earth. When its level decreased, the Earth cooled even more. So why did carbon dioxide decrease? Scientists still don't know exactly. There could be many reasons, such as the oceans absorbing the gas, changes in vegetation, and a decrease in volcanic activity. In conclusion, the Ice Age was not caused by a single factor, but by a combination of many factors. The world is in a delicate balance. When this balance is disrupted, the climate can change dramatically. Now let's get to the main question. What was the world like during the Ice Age? It was a very different planet from today. First of all, the temperature. In the northern hemisphere, the average temperature was 10 to 15 degrees lower than it is today. That's a huge difference. Today, the average winter temperature in Istanbul is around 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. During the Ice Age, it could have been minus 5 to 0 degrees Celsius. However, the situation was much more difficult in regions near the poles. In Northern Europe, North America, and Siberia, temperatures could drop to minus 30 or minus 40 degrees Celsius. Even in summer, the temperature rarely rose above zero. Life was extremely difficult under these conditions. Glaciers covered the world. Today, glaciers are only found in the polar regions and high mountains. But during the Ice Age, glaciers spread over much wider areas. A large part of North America, from Canada to the northern part of what is now the United States, was completely covered in ice. The thickness of these glaciers could reach 3,000 meters in some places. Imagine a mass of ice 3 kilometers thick. This enormous weight even changed the shape of the Earth. The land beneath the glaciers was crushed and collapsed. Today, the Great Lakes of Canada are traces left by these glaciers. A similar picture existed in Europe. The Scandinavian countries, the British Isles, northern Germany, and Poland were largely covered in ice. Mountain ranges like the Alps, Pyrenees, and Caucasus were surrounded by massive glaciers. These glaciers carved valleys and transported rocks, creating new geographies. Today, The lakes in Switzerland and the fjords in Norway have their origins in these glacial movements. The glaciers didn't just stand still, they moved slowly. They could advance a few meters a year, sometimes tens of meters. This movement dragged, crushed, and shaped everything beneath them. In Asia, Siberia wasn't covered in ice, but the cold was extremely severe. Much of Siberia was covered in a layer of permanently frozen soil, called permafrost. In the summer, a thin layer of soil on the surface would thaw, but the soil underneath remained frozen year-round. Trees couldn't grow under these conditions. Only grasses, mosses, and stunted shrubs could grow there. This type of terrain is called tundra. Tundra was the most common type of terrain during the Ice Age. Today, it's only seen in polar regions, but back then it spread over much wider areas. The southern hemisphere was also affected, but not as severely. The vast majority of land masses in the southern hemisphere are already in tropical and temperate regions. However, the glaciers in the Ant Mountains expanded. The glaciers in New Zealand grew. Antarctica was already completely covered in ice, and that didn't change. But overall, the effects of the Ice Age were much more pronounced in the northern hemisphere. This is because the northern hemisphere has more landmass. Land cools quickly, while oceans cool slowly. Therefore, the northern hemisphere glaciated faster. Now, an interesting question. What happened to sea levels? Where did the glaciers get their water? The answer is the oceans. Glaciers formed not from atmospheric moisture, but from water evaporating from the oceans. Snow fell, accumulated, and turned into ice. But this water came from the oceans. Therefore, as the glaciers grew, sea levels fell. At the peak of the Ice Age, sea levels were 120 meters lower than they are today. That's a massive drop. 120 meters is the height of a 30-story building. The oceans had receded so much. This completely changed the world map. Many areas that are underwater today were land then. There was no sea between England and France. There was a land bridge. The British Isles were connected to the European continent. People could walk to England. The Mediterranean was smaller. The Black Sea was like a much smaller lake. The Bering Strait between Asia and America was also land. This land bridge is called Beringia. People and animals migrated from Asia to America by crossing this bridge. The ancestors of the indigenous peoples of America today crossed this bridge. The islands of Indonesia were connected to each other. Australia and New Guinea were a single landmass. The vast areas in Southeast Asia that are seen today were then fertile plains. People lived there, hunted and gathered. But when the Ice Age ended, the glaciers melted, sea levels rose, and these areas were submerged. Today, the traces of the civilizations that lived in those regions lie at the bottom of the sea. Perhaps in the future, underwater archaeology will discover these lost worlds. The climate during the Ice Age was not only cold but also dry. Glaciers trapped water. Less water evaporated from the oceans. Rainfall decreased. Tropical forests shrank. The Sahara Desert was larger than it is today. The Middle East, Iran, and Central Asia were much drier. However, the opposite happened in some regions. For example, lakes formed in parts of the Sahara. This is because climate systems changed. Rainfall patterns changed. Some regions unexpectedly became humid. Climate is a complex system, and the Ice Age increased this complexity even more. Wind systems also changed. Today's air currents were blowing in different places during the Ice Age. This determined which regions would receive rainfall. For example, the ocean currents that bring warm air to Europe today were flowing further south then. This made Europe colder. Jet streams flowed further south. Storms followed different paths. The world of the Ice Age was not just a cold world. It was a completely different climate system. Vegetation also underwent major changes. Forests retreated south. There are plenty of trees in northern Europe today, but there were no trees during the Ice Age. there were only grasslands and tundra. The Mediterranean region is warm and grassy today, but back then there were cooler, wetter forested areas. Siberia has taiga forests today, but steppe and tundra dominated during the Ice Age. In South America, the Amazon rainforest shrank, giving way to open land. Tropical forests in Africa fragmented, and savanna areas expanded. These changes in vegetation directly affected animal life. Now we come to perhaps the most exciting part: Ice Age animals. Enormous, magnificent creatures that are now extinct, known only from fossil records and frozen remains. The most famous inhabitant of the Ice Age is the woolly mammoth. Mammoths were distant relatives of today's elephants. However, they had shorter legs, were hairier, and were adapted to the cold. Mammoths' bodies were covered in a thick layer of wool, which protected them from the freezing cold. Their ears were smaller than those of modern elephants, as large ears cause heat loss in the cold. Mammoths' tusks were incredibly long, reaching up to 4 meters in some examples. They used these tusks to forage for food and dig in the snow. Mammoths were herbivores. They fed on steppe and tundra plants. They ate grasses, mosses, and shrub leaves. A large mammoth would consume 150 kilograms of plants per day. They lived in herds, much like elephants today. Female mammoths and their offspring stayed together. Males lived more independently. Mammoths were highly intelligent and had complex social structures. Fossil evidence shows that mammoths protected their young and helped older individuals. Some mammoth remains found in Siberia are so well preserved that they still have flesh and fur on them. These frozen specimens have given scientists a great deal of information about mammoth genetics, diet, and life. Now let's look at saber-toothed tigers. These magnificent hunters were the most fearsome predators of the Ice Age. Unlike today's tigers, saber-toothed tigers had incredibly long upper jaw teeth. These teeth could reach 18 centimeters, the length of an adult's hand. These long teeth were used to inflict deep wounds on the neck and abdomen of their prey. However, these teeth were fragile. They could break if they hit hard bone. Therefore, saber-toothed tigers targeted the soft tissues of their prey. Saber-toothed tigers were powerfully built. They were heavier than today's tigers. Their front legs were very muscular, because when they caught their prey, they would leap on them and hold them with their powerful forearms. They hunted large mammals. We hunted them, horses, deer, even young mammoths. Fossil findings show that saber-toothed tigers hunted in groups. Just like today's lions, they moved together and surrounded large prey. The Labatar pits in America contain hundreds of saber-toothed tiger fossils. Animals trapped in these pits would attract other predators, and they would also get trapped. Thus, a huge fossil bed was formed over thousands of years. Giant sloths were also interesting inhabitants of the Ice Age. Today, sloths living in South America are small tree-dwelling creatures. But in the Ice Age, there were giant sloths, and these could be 6 meters long, standing as tall as the second floor of a house. These enormous creatures moved slowly. Just like today's sloths, their large size protected them from predators. Giant sloths were herbivores. They ate tree leaves and branches. Thanks to their strong forearms and large claws, they could break off tree branches. Fossils have been found in the Americas. They lived in both North and South America. Some species lived in coastal areas and fed on seaweed. These were rare mammals that could swim in water. The extinction of giant sloths is still a debated topic. Was it climate change, human hunting, or both? Scientists are still investigating this question. However, these magnificent creatures disappeared from the face of the earth approximately 10,000 years ago. Woolly rhinoceroses were also important animals of the Ice Age. They were ancestors of today's rhinoceroses, but they had adapted to the cold climate. They had thick fur, just like mammoths. They had 2 horns on their noses. These horns were used to dig through the snow to reach the plants underneath. Woolly rhinoceroses lived in steppe regions. They fed on grasses and shrubs. They preferred to live alone, but sometimes formed small groups. Their powerful bodies and horns made them a difficult target for predators. Frozen rhinoceros remains found in Siberia taught scientists a great deal about these animals. In some specimens, even their stomach contents were preserved, allowing for a precise determination of their diet. Woolly rhinoceroses were very common, living across a vast area from Europe to Siberia. However, they too became extinct at the end of the Ice Age 10,000 years ago. Today, only their fossils and traces in cave paintings remain. The giant tree-eating deer, or megalomaniac, was one of the most magnificent animals of the Ice Age. This deer species was much larger than normal deer, reaching shoulder heights of up to 2 meters. But what truly made it special were its antlers, which could span up to 3.5 meters. Imagine carrying antlers 3.5 meters wide. These antlers were heavy, weighing up to 40 kilograms. Male deer used these antlers against each other during mating season, trying to impress the females. Each year, the horns fell off and new ones grew. Megaloceros lived in Europe and Asia, preferring open forest areas and grasslands. They fed on grasses, leaves, and young branches. Fossil evidence shows these animals lived in herds. However, their large antlers also created a disadvantage. Movement in wooded areas was difficult. The antlers could get caught in branches. Also, growing such large antlers required a lot of energy. When the climate changed and vegetation decreased, megaloceros struggled to survive. The last examples disappeared around 7,000 years ago. Cave bears were also important inhabitants of the Ice Age. They were larger than today's bears, weighing up to 500 kilograms. As the name suggests, they lived in caves and hibernated. However, cave bears were herbivores, feeding on plants instead of meat. Fossil evidence shows that their teeth were adapted to eating grass and fruit, making them less dangerous. But they were still large and powerful animals. Cave bear fossils have been found in many caves in Europe. Their bones accumulated there because they used the same caves for thousands of years. Interestingly, these caves were also used by humans. Humans and cave bears sometimes lived in the same cave at different times. Cave paintings depict these bears, suggesting that humans respected them. Cave bears began to disappear approximately 24,000 years ago. The last examples vanished 15,000 years ago. Other animals of the Ice Age included giant bison, wild horses, reindeer, musk oxen, wolves, hyenas, and mountain goats. Each had adapted to the cold climate and developed strategies for survival. Some migrated, changing location seasonally. Some developed thick coats to protect themselves from the cold. Some acquired special techniques to find food under the snow. The Ice Age ecosystem was rich and complex. There was a delicate balance between predators and prey. But there was one predator that stood out from the rest. Humans, Homo sapiens, or modern humans, were the most intelligent, adaptable, and successful species of the Ice Age. Humans not only survived the Ice Age, but they also spread, developed, and created cultures. Now let's examine how humans lived during the Ice Age. Humans shared the same world with mammoths, but they possessed vastly different abilities. Humans could make tools, light fires, speak, and cooperate. These abilities made them the most influential beings of the Ice Age. At the beginning of the Ice Age, there were different human species on Earth. Neanderthals lived in Europe. Sea ovens were found in Asia. Some populations of Homo erectus were still alive. However, over time, Homo sapiens, our species, replaced all other human species. Around 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals disappeared. Sea ovens also vanished around a similar time. The exact reason for this is unknown. Perhaps Homo sapiens were more successful hunters. Perhaps they had better social structures. Perhaps they carried diseases, or perhaps they simply had a competitive advantage. As a result, 30,000 years ago, Homo sapiens was the only human species left on Earth. The Ice Age was a hunter-gatherer society. Agriculture was not yet developed. Humans subsisted on whatever they could find in nature. Their food consisted of the animals they hunted, the plants they gathered, fruits, roots, and mushrooms. However, this was not a simple life. Surviving in Ice Age conditions required great knowledge, skill, and resilience. People had to know which plants were edible. They had to know which animals were suitable as prey. They had to predict weather conditions, find shelter, maintain fire, and make clothing. All this was knowledge passed down through generations. Caves were important shelters for people. They were ideal for protection from cold, rain, and predators. However, not every cave was usable. The entrance to the cave had to be narrow, the interior wide. It should not leak water, and it should have ventilation. People carefully selected caves and used them seasonally. Some caves were used during the winter months, while tents were set up in open areas during the summer months. These tents were made of animal hides and stretched over wooden or bone poles. In some remains found in Siberia, tent structures made of mammoth bones were discovered. Large mammoth bones formed the frame of the tent. Skins were placed over it. Such structures were quite sturdy and resistant to cold. A fire was lit inside to retain heat. Fire was vital for humans. It was necessary for cooking, warmth, light, and warding off predators. People preserved the fire, trying never to let it go out, because rekindling it was difficult. Methods such as rubbing two stones together or grinding wood were used. Clothing was also key to survival. Ice dwellers sewed clothing from animal skins. They used bone needles and threads made from animal tendons. Clothing was layered. A thin layer of leather was worn underneath, and a thick, furry layer on top. Gloves, hats, and boots were also made. Shoes were especially important. Walking barefoot in freezing cold was impossible. Some archaeological findings show that stitched leather shoes were used 30,000 years ago. These stitches are very fine and regular, demonstrating how skilled humans were. The diet was varied. People ate meat, but not only meat. Fish, birds, small animals, insects, eggs, plants, fruits, mushrooms, and roots were consumed. Diet changed according to the seasons. Fruits and plants were abundant in the summer months. Hunting was more important during the winter months. Some foods were preserved, dried, or smoked. Fats and bone marrow were very valuable for energy and were consumed especially during the winter. Hunting was a communal effort. Hunting a large animal alone was almost impossible. People acted in groups. Plans were made, and tasks were assigned. Some chased the prey. Some ambushed. Some set traps. Spears, bows and arrows, and stone knives were used. These tools were made of stone, bone, and horn. The spearheads were extremely sharp and carefully crafted. Some spears could be 2 meters long. They were thrown from a distance. Mammoth hunting required special organization. Mammoths were giant animals. An adult mammoth weighed between 5 and 6 tons. Killing such an animal was not easy. People would chase mammoths into cliffs, swamps, or narrow passages. Then they would attack as a group, throwing spears. After being hit, a mammoth could bleed for hours before eventually collapsing. When he died, the entire community would skin him alive and use his bones. A mammoth could feed a community for months. Mammoth meat was dried and preserved. Leather was used for clothing and shelter construction. Bones became tools and building materials. The Ice Age people weren't just concerned with survival. They also created art, performed rituals, and formed social structures. Cave paintings are the best example of this. The Lascaux Cave in France and the Altamira Cave in Spain contain world-famous cave paintings. These paintings depict bison, horses, deer, and mammoths. The paintings are very detailed. Even the movements and muscles of the animals are shown. Why did people make these paintings? Perhaps for hunting magic, perhaps to tell stories, perhaps out of a love of art. We don't know the exact answer, but these paintings show that people had a rich inner world. Musical instruments were also made. Bone flutes have been found, dating back 35,000 years. These flutes were made from perforated musical bones and could produce melodies when blown into. People made music, danced, and held rituals. Perhaps music brought people together before hunts or during funeral ceremonies. It fostered emotional bonds. Artifacts were found in graves. People buried their dead, placing objects on top. Some graves contained beads, tools, and hunting weapons. This indicates that these people had beliefs about the afterlife. Perhaps they believed in an afterlife. Perhaps they believed that spirits continued to live. Graves also reflect social status. Some graves are richer and more elaborately prepared, suggesting that some individuals were more important within the society. Beads, necklaces, and bracelets were made. Seashells, animal teeth, and colored stones were used. These ornaments indicated identity, perhaps tribal affiliation. People tried to express themselves and valued aesthetics. The Ice Age was not primitive. On the contrary, people were creative, intelligent, and emotional beings. Language was advanced. Homo sapiens possessed complex linguistic structures. They could transmit information, plan, and tell stories through speech. Language was humanity's greatest advantage. Other animals could communicate instantly, but humans could recount the past and plan for the future. A hunt would be described, and that information would be used in the next hunt. A danger was shared. Everyone would take precautions accordingly. Language made communities strong. Cooperation was possible. There were families and tribes. People lived in small groups, usually communities of 20 to 50 people. These groups were held together by kinship ties. The elders were the source of knowledge, passing on their experiences to the younger generation. Children grew up within the community, and everyone protected them. Women and men took on different roles, but both were equally important. Women gathered and cared for children, while men hunted and protected shelters. However, these roles could be flexible, varying depending on the situation. During the Ice Age, humanity expanded. Migration, starting in Africa, reached the entire world. Homo sapiens spread to Europe, Asia, Australia, and eventually to America. This expansion lasted tens of thousands of years. People discovered new lands and adapted to new climatic conditions. Each new region presented challenges, but people always found solutions. The fact that crossing the sea was necessary to reach Australia meant that these people built boats. To reach America, they crossed the Bering Strait. These migration waves were affected by the climatic conditions of the Ice Age. Migration accelerated during Ice Age periods. Technology advanced. Stone tools became more sophisticated over time. Initially, simple broken stones were used, but later, regularly processed stone knives, arrowheads, and digging tools were made. Bone and horn were also processed. Needles, hooks, and fishing harpoons were produced. This technological progress improved the quality of life for people. It enabled more efficient hunting. Now let's ask a question. Did humans play a role in the extinction of Ice Age animals? This is still a subject of debate among scientists. Mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, and giant sloths became extinct around 10,000 years ago. This coincides with the end of the Ice Age. Climate change is definitely a factor. Glaciers melted, temperatures rose, and vegetation changed. Some animals could not adapt to this change. However, human hunting may also have been effective. Humans were efficient hunters. They targeted large animals. Killing a mammoth would provide food for a community for months. Therefore, mammoths were subjected to intense hunting pressure. Some studies show that megafauna disappeared rapidly in areas where humans spread. For example, when humans arrived in Australia, giant kangaroos, giant bats, and giant birds lived there. A few thousand years after humans arrived, these animals disappeared. Similarly, in America, humans were present approximately 15,000 years ago, and many large mammals became extinct 10,000 years ago. Is this a coincidence, or are humans responsible? The answer is probably both. Climate change weakened animals. Human hunting delivered the final blow. But this story isn't one-sided. Humans were also affected by the Ice Age. They struggled. They suffered losses. Many human communities perished from hunger, cold, and disease. Only the most adaptable, intelligent, and resilient communities survived. The Ice Age shaped us, genetically and culturally. Today, we are the descendants of those who survived the Ice Age. So the Ice Age is not just the past, but also a part of our story. So how did the Ice Age end? About 15,000 years ago, the world began to warm. This warming was slow and gradual. Glaciers began to melt. Sea levels began to rise. Temperatures increased. Precipitation patterns changed. These changes continued for thousands of years. 11,000 years ago, the Ice Age officially ended and the Holocene epoch began. The Holocene is the period we are living in, the last 11,000 years. Why did the climate warm? Again, changes in the Earth's orbit played a role. The amount of heat we receive from the sun increased. The level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere rose. Glaciers melted. Ice surfaces shrank. Less sunlight was reflected. This further warmed the Earth. Another domino effect, but this time in the opposite direction. Warming accelerated itself. The melting of glaciers had dramatic consequences. Sea levels rose by 120 meters. Coastal areas were submerged. The Bering River disappeared. The connection between Asia and America was severed. The British Isles separated from Europe. The English Channel formed. The islands of Indonesia became detached. Vast plains in Southeast Asia were submerged. People were forced to migrate inland from the coasts. Many settlements disappeared. Vegetation changed. Tundra and steppe areas retreated. Forests expanded. Forests began to grow in northern Europe. In Siberia, the taiga forest developed. The Mediterranean region became warmer and drier. Tropical forests expanded. This change in vegetation directly affected animal life. Suitable habitats for mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and saber-toothed tigers disappeared. They were replaced by the animals we know today. Deer, wild boars, wolves, bears, foxes, the Ice Age mammals, were replaced by smaller, more agile animals. For humans, this change created both challenges and opportunities. Large game animals decreased, but the diversity of plants and small animals increased. Fish became abundant in rivers. Fruit trees proliferated in forests. People had to change their dietary habits. They began gathering more plants, fishing, and hunting small animals. This change eventually paved the way for the birth of agriculture. About 12,000 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent region, that is, today's Middle East, people began to cultivate plants intentionally for the first time. Wild wheat and barley seeds were sown. This was a revolutionary change. Now, people were not only gathering from nature, but also producing. Agriculture gradually spread. Over thousands of years, agriculture developed independently in different parts of the world. Rice cultivation began in China, maize in Central America, and potatoes in the Andes Mountains. With agriculture came settled life. Hunter-gatherers were nomads, constantly on the move. But farmers had to settle down because they needed to tend to the crops. Villages were established, houses were built, and the first towns formed. The population increased because agriculture could support more food production. However, agriculture also brought challenges. Diseases increased because people were in close contact and lived alongside animals. The workload increased because plowing, planting, and harvesting were difficult. Social inequalities emerged because some people owned more land. Nevertheless, agriculture was a turning point for humanity. Civilizations were built upon agriculture. Writing was invented because it was necessary to keep records of harvests. Mathematics developed because it was necessary to measure land and calculate taxes. Law emerged because property disputes had to be resolved. Cities, temples, and palaces were built. The end of the Ice Age marked the beginning of the Age of Civilization. However, scientists are not sure if the Ice Age is truly over. In fact, we are currently in an interglacial period. The Holocene is a period of warming, but is the Pleistocene the end of the Ice Age, or just an interim period? If past cycles continue, glaciers could advance again in thousands or tens of thousands of years. The world could cool again. However, this natural cycle may have been disrupted by human activities. The Industrial Revolution released large amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Global temperatures rose. Today, glaciers continue to melt, but this time not due to natural causes, but human-caused ones. How this will affect the future is uncertain. Perhaps a natural cooling period will be delayed or prevented by human-induced warming. Perhaps a new balance will be established, or perhaps the world will become a much warmer planet. Scientists are investigating these questions. They are developing climate models. They are trying to understand the future by looking at the past. The lessons we learned from the Ice Age are valuable today. The climate can change, sometimes dramatically. Living things have to adapt. Some succeed, some perish. Humans are intelligent and adaptable, yet still subject to the forces of nature. We must respect Ice Age humanity because they overcame incredible challenges. With simple tools, limited resources, and harsh climatic conditions, they survived. They didn't just survive. They created art, formed communities, and spread across the world. Archaeological remains of the Ice Age are still being discovered. In Siberia, melting glaciers are revealing mammoth carcasses. New caves are being found in Europe, containing paintings tens of thousands of years old. Submerged landmasses are being explored underwater, and traces of ancient settlements are being sought. Every new discovery increases our knowledge about the Ice Age. Genetic studies are examining the DNA of Ice Age animals. Some scientists are even considering resurrecting mammoths, imagining creating mammoth-like creatures by extracting DNA from frozen remains and inserting it into modern elephants. This leads to ethical debates, but the effort to push the boundaries of science continues. The Ice Age lives on in popular culture. Films, books, and documentaries depict it. Mammoths, tigers with tusks, and Neanderthals feature in our stories. These creatures fuel our imaginations and connect us to the past. Children are curious and ask questions when they see mammoth fossils. Museums show great interest in Ice Age exhibits. People want to see frozen mammoths, hold stone axes, and examine cave paintings. The Ice Age is also humanity's shared heritage. People from every continent lived through the Ice Age. The peoples of Africa, Asia, Europe, Australia, and America were shaped by their ancestors during that challenging period. The Ice Age experience unites us. Although people living on different continents were unaware of each other's experiences, they faced similar challenges and developed similar solutions. They made fire, crafted tools, built shelters, and created art. This shared experience is part of humanity's universal story. Today, what remains of the Ice Age is not just fossils and archaeological findings. Our genetic heritage was also affected by the Ice Age. Some genetic traits evolved to adapt to Ice Age conditions. For example, light skin tone is common in people of European descent. This provided an advantage for vitamin D synthesis in regions with little sunlight. In some people of Asian descent, the structure of their eyelids provided protection against the cold. Some genetic groups adapted to a high-fat diet because animal fat was an important energy source during the Ice Age. We also have genetic heritage from Neanderthals and Coaces. It is known that modern humans interbred with Neanderthals and transferred genetic material. People of European and Asian descent have 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. Some parts of this DNA are related to the immune system. Genes we inherited from Neanderthals may have increased our resistance to disease. Similarly, some people of Asian and Oceanian descent have COA's DNA. This genetic heritage is living evidence of the Ice Age. The Ice Age also shaped the geography. Valleys carved by glaciers, rocks carried by them, and sand and gravel deposited created the landscape we see today. The U-shaped valleys in the Alps are a product of glacial melt. Thousands of lakes in the Scandinavian countries were formed by water filling the depressions left behind by glaciers. Hudson Bay in Canada is a massive glacial depression. The Great Lakes region in the United States is a result of glacial movement. Soil structure was also affected by the Ice Age. Minerals carried by glaciers created rich soils and fertile agricultural areas. Loess soils in Central Europe were formed from the accumulation of fine dust particles carried by the wind. These soils are extremely fertile and very suitable for agriculture. Thanks to the Ice Age, some regions today have rich agricultural lands. The end of the Ice Age was also a period of mass extinction. The vast majority of megaphae, or large mammals, disappeared. Mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, saber-toothed tigers, giant sloths, cave bears, megalolociros, and giant bison became extinct. This loss was not limited to these species alone. Ecosystems changed. As large herbivores disappeared, vegetation changed. As large predators disappeared, the populations of prey animals changed. A new ecological balance was formed, but this new balance was different from the old one. This extinction event is being compared to the biodiversity loss we are experiencing today. Many species are threatened by human activities today. Habitat loss, climate change, and overhunting are putting species at risk of extinction. The end of Ice Age extinction serves as a warning. Ecological balances are fragile. Once species disappear, they don't return. However, that extinction was a combination of natural processes and human impact. Today's extinction is entirely human-caused. The experiences of the Ice Age instilled resilience in humanity. People learned to adapt to very different climatic conditions. They managed to live everywhere, from polar regions to deserts, from tropical forests to high mountains. This adaptability is humanity's greatest strength. The Ice Age developed skills. We learned to find solutions to challenges, to use resources efficiently, and to cooperate. Perhaps we can find solutions to the global problems we face today with similar approaches. The story of the Ice Age is also a story of hope. Humans faced so many hardships, yet they survived, thrived, and grew. If we are here today, it is thanks to the success of our ancestors who survived the Ice Age. They didn't give up. They fought. They resisted for future generations. This legacy lives on in us. When faced with difficulties, humanity has always found a way. The Ice Age is the greatest proof of this. Scientists continue to study the Ice Age because there are still unanswered questions. What exactly was our relationship with Neanderthals? Why did they disappear while we survived? How responsible were humans for the extinction of mammoths? When and how did the first immigrants arrive in America? What was the true meaning of the cave paintings? These questions occupy researchers. New articles are published every year. New theories are put forward. Old theories are updated. Technology helps with this research. DNA analysis deciphers the genetic structure of fossils. Radiocarbon dating determines the age of findings. Three-dimensional imaging technology makes it possible to examine cave paintings in more detail. Satellite imagery helps identify archaeological sites. Artificial intelligence analyzes data obtained from fossils. Science is advancing rapidly, and our knowledge of the Ice Age is increasing every year. Perhaps even more astonishing discoveries will be made in the future. Perhaps the written symbols left by Ice Age people will be deciphered. Perhaps lost cities will be found underwater. Perhaps mammoths will actually be resurrected. Perhaps traces of the languages spoken by Ice Age people will be discovered. Science never stops asking curious questions and searching for answers. The Ice Age is an endless source that fuels curiosity. The Ice Age is a time capsule in time. Thousands of years old remains are hidden within the glaciers, deep in the permafrost. Frozen mammoths, plant remains, and insect specimens are perfectly preserved. These remains are like windows into that era. Scientists reconstruct the past by looking through these windows. What plants were there? What insects lived there? What was the weather like? What was the temperature? All of this is extracted from the fossil record. The melting ice is opening these time capsules. As the climate warms, the permafrost in Siberia, Canada, and Alaska is thawing. Mammoth remains are surfacing. Some remains are so well preserved that scientists are shocked. Some mammoths still have undigested grass in their stomachs. Some woolly rhinoceroses still have their fur on their faces. These findings are scientifically invaluable, but also sad, because these magnificent creatures are no longer on our planet. The Ice Age is depicted in museum exhibits. Natural history museums all over the world have Ice Age halls. Mammoth skeletons, tiger skulls with sword-toothed tusks, stone tools, and copies of cave paintings are on display. Children connect with the past as they visit these exhibits. Perhaps one day one of these children will become a paleontologist and research the Ice Age. Museums are crucial for preserving the past and passing it on to future generations. Art and literature are also inspired by the Ice Age. Novelists tell stories of Ice Age people. Painters depict mammoths and cave scenes. Films bring the Ice Age world to life. These artistic interpretations bring the Ice Age to life in our imaginations. When real scientific data meets art, a rich cultural heritage is created. At the end of the Ice Age, humanity turned a new page. The transition from hunter-gatherer to agriculture, from rural settlements to cities, from oral culture to written culture. All of these happened after the Ice Age. However, these transitions were not easy. They took thousands of years. People slowly adapted to new lifestyles. Some communities switched to agriculture. Some continued to be hunter-gatherers. Even today, there are hunter-gatherer communities in some parts of the world. They are the last representatives of the Ice Age lifestyle. But the modern world is affecting them too. Forests are disappearing. Game animals are decreasing. The outside world is changing these communities. Perhaps in a few generations, the hunter-gatherer lifestyle will be completely a thing of the past. This is both a loss and a transformation. Humanity is constantly changing, constantly adapting. We have never stopped since the Ice Age. The Ice Age shows us our past, but it also gives us clues about our future. The climate can change. Sometimes species can become extinct rapidly. New challenges may arise. Humans adapt, but everything has its limits. The climate crisis, biodiversity loss, and resource depletion we are experiencing today must be considered in light of the lessons learned from the Ice Age. The past is a teacher. The story of the Ice Age shows us what we can and cannot do. Ultimately, the Ice Age is one of the most impactful periods in human history. Harsh climatic conditions, giant animals, struggling humans. This period shaped who we are. Our genetic heritage, our cultural experiences, our survival skills all come from the Ice Age. Today, while we lie comfortably in our homes and warm beds, we should think about our ancestors who lived during that time. They survived in freezing cold, in caves, in a world surrounded by dangers. Their courage, intelligence, and resilience have been passed down to us. The Ice Age also reminds us of the power of nature. Humans are intelligent and capable, but small in the face of nature. When glaciers covered the world, humans had to adapt. Today, the climate is changing, but this time it is due to our influence. We must respect nature and live in harmony with it. The Ice Age shows how important it is. Now we have come to the end of this long journey. We have examined the Ice Age from beginning to end. We've seen how glaciers formed, how the world changed, how animals lived, and how humans survived. Perhaps your eyes are already closed. Maybe you've drifted off into the world of mammoths. Maybe you've gone to those caves where Ice Age people sat around fires in your dreams. The Ice Age is not just a history lesson, but also a reminder. No matter how many difficulties humanity faced, it always found a way. Mammoths disappeared, but humans remained. The glaciers melted, but our story continued. Thousands of years later, here we are. We tell stories, we learn, we wonder. This curiosity is one of the things that makes us human. Understanding the past is important for shaping the future. Perhaps one day, in the very distant future, people will look back at our time and be amazed. How did we live? How did we think? What did we value? Just like our perspective on the Ice Age, history is a cycle. Each generation learns from the previous one and passes it on to the next. We are the descendants of Ice Age people and will be the ancestors of future generations. This means carrying responsibility. Dear viewer, if you are still listening, thank you. If you are asleep, that was our intention. This documentary was prepared to both satisfy your curiosity and to relax you. We journeyed through the world of the Ice Age. We walked on frozen ground. We saw mammoths. We entered caves. We sat by the fire. Perhaps you will experience that world in your dreams. Perhaps when you wake up tomorrow, you will want to learn something new about the Ice Age. In the next video, we will explore another historical period, another engineering marvel, another mystery. Until then, take care of yourselves. Stay curious. Keep learning. Respect the past, because the past is our story, and our future is in the pages we are about to write. The cold winds of the Ice Age no longer blow, but their traces remain in our souls. The struggle, courage, and intelligence of our ancestors live on in us. They survived among the glaciers. We too face our own challenges. The legacy we inherited from them gives us strength. Humanity has always found a way. It has always looked forward, always hoped. Good night. I wish you peaceful sleep. May your dreams be filled with mammoths, glaciers, and stars. Wander through the silent world of the Ice Age. Meet the people of that era. Warm yourself by their fire. Listen to their stories. Perhaps a dream is no different from reality. Both are worlds created by our minds. The Ice Age was a reality in the past. Now it lives in our dreams. Your eyelids are slowly closing. Your breaths are regular, calm. Your body is relaxed. Your mind peaceful. The silence of the glaciers envelopes you. Snow falls slowly. Everything is white. Mammoths walk in the distance. Their footsteps are soft. The wind is gentle. The stars shine. You are now in the Ice Age, but you are safe. You are warm. You are peaceful. History unfolds in the depths of your sleep. You go back thousands of years. The light of the fire shines from the mouth of the cave. Inside, people are telling stories. Children are listening. The elderly are smiling. Shadows dance on the walls. It's snowing outside, but it's warm inside. The The smell of the fire, the feel of the leather, the sense of community. The Ice Age is tough, but people endure together, live together, hope together. Now you're completely relaxed. Thank you. Have a good night's sleep.